going to record our interview. Awesome. Well, Deanna, thank you so much for agreeing to go live with me today. I really looked forward to talking to you and hearing your story. And knowing that you're a part of our summit is really important to me because I know that you have important information to share with the audience. What led you on your journey to becoming healthy?
Well, it's an interesting story. I basically was serving as a physicist in the Air Force in the military, and I thought life was great. I was at about 26 years in, and all of a sudden I found out I had a diagnosis of ovarian cancer. And when that happened, that really kind of told me, although I was very health conscious growing up and, was a nationally certified fitness instructor for 8 years, and just tested annually with the military. There were some things I realized I probably missed. And so I took that as a wake-up call and went on this journey to really research everything I could about cancer and how I might decide to heal from it. And through my research, I learned to, go on this holistic path, which included changing my diet. So I adapted into a raw vegan diet. And within 3 months of changing my diet, my elevated tumor markers dropped back to normal. And I actually saw shrinkage in the tumor. So I knew there was something to diet, and that kind of spurred me on. And so that was my start. But, it would take a while. My whole journey through diagnosis to recovery was about 2 years, but part of that included where both of my lungs collapsed, filled with fluid, and I had to be put on oxygen, and I was admitted into hospice, and they gave me 4 weeks to live.
Wow. I knew when you had told me that you were given 4 weeks to live, you said it was a traumatic experience. So my kitty's been sick actually, and
Yeah.
he was at kitty ER last week. So I don't have the heart to lock him out of my office. This is pretty much where he has stayed since last week. So that was pretty traumatic, but not nearly as traumatic as you being told that you had 4 weeks to live. So I didn't realize both of your lungs collapsed and they didn't think you were going to make it.
No, they didn't. They had written me off to die, so they were trying to pump me full of morphine and all these, painkillers. I was in a tremendous amount of pain because I had severe edema. I was retaining like 10 pounds of fluid per day. And I got so heavy, I didn't recognize my legs anymore. They looked like huge elephant legs. My hands were swollen. I couldn't bend my fingers, couldn't bend down to, put on socks. I couldn't even roll over in the bed because I was so heavy with the fluid. I needed nurses to do everything for me.
Wow. So how did you get yourself through that to even go down a holistic path? And I caught what you said, that you wanted to choose the healing path for your cancer. And we have choices. So I do want the audience to hear that we have choices, even though the medical model might only provide one. I think that there are multiple choices when it comes to a health crisis. But in that state, how could you even choose what to do? How did you get yourself through that?
Well, it was interesting because I was just, going along day by day, in hospice, having the nurses check on me, and they kept wanting to give me these drugs, and I refused, and they would actually get perturbed. And I, the rationale or the way I was thinking about it was that, if my body is deteriorating, I don't want my mind to go with it. That's the last thing. I want clarity. I want connection with my body. I don't want to be drugged up so I become disconnected from the pain and what's going on. And so I was in this state, and one day my blood pressure tanked. And when that happened, all the muscles in my body began to contract. And I was just in so much pain because it felt like my abdomen was so swollen. Nurses who didn't know that I had cancer, just looking at me, would think that I was 8 months pregnant because that's how swollen my belly was. And so when I was in that state, I was in so much pain. I called out for help. And at the time, it was my aunt and cousin were helping me. And, my cousin called 911. Well, first she called the nurse, and the nurse says, well, we don't have, the nurse basically told her, I'm sorry, to give me pain medication and to call her back in a half hour. And my cousin says, we don't have time for that. I'm going to call 911. So she did. The first ambulance came out, but they left, I think because I was in hospice. They just didn't even take me. So she didn't give up. She called 911 again, and another ambulance team came out. This time they took me to a small community hospital. And when I saw the doctor, I just begged them to draw the fluids out of my abdomen. And they said, oh, you're just going to have to wait till tomorrow. We can't do this now. It was like probably about 2:30 in the morning on a Friday, Friday night. And I just said, I don't think I can last. It felt like something catastrophic was going to happen. And so the doctor looked at me and he says, I don't normally do this procedure, but I will do this to help you. And so as soon as he started that procedure to drain the fluid, I felt an immediate relief to, it was just really excruciating pain. And then after that, they decided to admit me back into the hospital. And that's when the oncologist came, and he just said that, if I wanted to survive, my only hope was to do chemo. He gave me 2 days to think about it. And during this time, I prayed and I just said, God, if you want me to do the chemo, I will do this. But I need to hear this directly from you because with my experience in the military, I just understood, the history. Chemotherapy came out of the military's chemical warfare program. And so some of it was not logical for me, that you would use, weapons to kill people, but that you would use that on someone who's really sick. And so what I heard back was to ask for the cytology report. And the cytology report is basically they're going to analyze the cells from the fluid that they took out of me to look for cancer cells. And mind you, back then I didn't even know what a cytology report was, but that's what I heard back when I prayed. And when I asked the oncologist for that, he said, no, we don't have time to wait for that report. 100%, it's going to be malignant. And if you don't start chemotherapy immediately, I'm going to put you right back into hospice where you will most certainly die. And I just pushed back, and I just said, can you just please humor me, doc? As a scientist, I just want to put my eyes on this report. And once I do, I'll make a decision. And so finally he agreed. 2 days later, he came back and he says, your intuition to wait for this report was a good one because it came back negative for cancer cells in the fluid, which then opened the opportunity for me to have surgery. And so then we had to, find a surgeon who was willing to accept me because at this point I was already denied care 3 times from Johns Hopkins University hospital system. And so I said, whoever you can find. And so he finally found a surgeon, and I had to be transferred there. And when I got there, I was in really dire straits because, like I said, both my lungs were filled. I was struggling, gasping for air, even though I was subject to oxygen. And the other thing is my blood levels were critically low. So I had to have 5 blood transfusions. And when the surgeon looked at me, he thought I was too emaciated to even undergo a major surgery. But having said all that, you know, because I also had fluid around my heart, so they thought I was having congestive heart failure. But they decided after they drained my lungs, and that was another traumatic event for me, because they ended up completely collapsing my right lung, which I really couldn't breathe at that point. I just felt like I was choking. I would be inhaling and nothing was going in. So they had to terminate that procedure. And then the very next day, I had surgery. And, you know, long story short, I had to go through months of rehabilitation after that, because I was, you know, really just all my muscles had atrophied. I had to relearn how to walk. They would tie straps around me to walk up and down the stairs, to navigate uneven ground on the outside. And so that's how I began my journey, because as a health coach, really.
So ovarian cancer, we all hear, is pretty deadly. And I mean, you were already in, was that like stage 4 ovarian cancer? You were already in hospice. So
Yeah.
that's pretty remarkable, because that doesn't seem to happen. So the difference, you think, is, well, chemo weakens people. So if you would have done chemo, it could have weakened you. I like how you said you wanted to keep your mind clear. You wanted the clarity of mind, and you didn't want to disconnect from your body, because that's where our intuition is. And so being able to make clear decision, being able to connect with our body and stay in touch with our intuition, that's pretty remarkable that you had enough awareness to do that. And some could say that this was just miracle, right? This was spontaneous remission or spontaneous healing, whatever it's called. What do you really attribute that to?
I do believe it was miraculous, and I attribute it to God, you know, the divine, our creator, because I could feel life slipping away from me. I was unable to eat any solid food for 40 days, because my left lung and my stomach was shifted further to the left, because of the aggressive growth of the tumor and the cancer. And anytime I tried to swallow anything, including fluids, it was excruciating pain. And so I was, you know, I knew I was very weakened. The only thing that sustained me on a physical level, I just drank green juices and wheatgrass juice, but it would take me literally 1 hour just to drink 1 glass of juice. I could only sip it.
Wow, that's amazing. So how did you learn about juicing and the benefits of wheatgrass?
Well, when I was first diagnosed, I went to a lot of different places. I went to places like Hallelujah Acres, to one of their lifestyle centers. That was my first exposure to the raw vegan and the juicing sort of a lifestyle. And then I also went to Living Foods Institute in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm not sure if they're still in operation. I also went to Hippocrates Health Institute in Florida, which I really felt like made a huge difference for me, because of just the number of, you know, just therapies they have to support the immune system, from cold laser therapy to infrared sauna to, you know, hyper and hypo, you know, just like cold and hot water plunges, that type of thing. And also, of course, the juicing. And so, and I went to the Cushy Institute as well to learn the macrobiotic diet. So I was just on a journey really to study which was the best diet. At the same time, I was enrolled in the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, going there through their program to be a holistic health coach. And it's interesting, because when I went into hospice, that's when I finally called them and says, you know, I'm not sure I'm going to make it. And they were so incredibly supportive, and they said, okay, we'll stop the program for you. And, you know, if you are able to recover, just, you can start it, but we will have to start from the beginning again. So, you know, and once I recovered, I went through, and so I ended up graduating a year later, but yeah.
Wow. I mean, you were in hospice. I really hope that sinks in for the listeners, because that would be so hopeless. I mean, I just can't imagine drumming up the hope that would be needed. And I'm a pretty fiery spirit, but wow, Deanna, that takes a lot of internal strength to drum up that kind of hope when you've already been put in hospice.
That's where I think we really tap into our spirit. Um, for me, because of my faith in God, I knew that I had done everything I knew to do. And here I was still going downhill in hospice, and the doctors had written me off. And so I knew that the only hope was really in God, in divine intervention. And that's where I placed my faith. Um, and I didn't know how it was going to turn out. And so I had made peace with, my death. And I look back at all the good times and in my life, I filled myself with gratitude, and it gave me peace to just let go, because prior to that I was terrified. I was afraid of dying, afraid of the dying process. And I realized that fear would be counterproductive and harmful, even to my immune system. And so it took, a lot of people praying for me. I had a community of people to help me. There was a medical missionary to help me make juices when I could no longer make my own juice. And it was really just through a collective effort. I had people praying for me from around the world, and I really could feel the strength from that.
Wow. Wow. So I would say most of us became health coaches because of a health crisis. So, and sometimes I even joke about it, right? Because at our age, when we were growing up, there was a list of professions, and nowhere on that list of professions was a health coach. And health coaching wasn't a profession because it wasn't a need. It was something that was created out of a need. And really, it only has arisen out of the failure of the current system. So if we weren't seeking the other alternatives other than those that we're often coerced into or told are our only options, health coaching wouldn't even exist. And so all of us had to go through something in order to find this new way. I can't say that anyone else I've met has had quite the traumatic story that you've had. But health coaches are often heard to say they were in a wheelchair or told they were going to be wheelchair bound, 12 medications, hospitalized, told they would never walk again, told they would never bear children. I know some on the last summit as well who were suicidal, planning their suicide until they changed their diet. And we don't realize how much our food is either hurting or helping us until we change it.
That's right.
And there's other factors. I'm not going to say that's the only factor that led to my type 2 diabetes and fibromyalgia and joint pain. It wasn't the only factor. I was also a smoker, and I was around a lot of toxins and chemicals. And but I did reverse all of that by changing the food that I'm putting in my body. And you found that your juices and the wheatgrass juice, like that is very, very healing. I found that too. I did 9 years of juicing pretty regularly. Now I can't say I'm as regular. I juice maybe a day or two a week, but it was every day. I didn't miss a day it was almost 10 years.
That's great. Yeah, I'm really just to me it makes sense that what we put in our bodies does make an impact. And because our cells need certain nutrients to regenerate. And if it's not getting the right types of food, the next generation of cells will be inferior to the previous, and that's how we get sick.
Yeah.
I ran into so many doctors when I was trying to heal from cancer who would really almost ridicule me and say, do you think juice could cure cancer? Why isn't it being, done in clinical trials? And, and that's when I had to kind of, go down the rabbit trail of just, the money trail, really. And I realized that, you can't patent a vegetable or fruit. And so that's why, the money lies in the pharmaceutical drugs. So then it was a big aha moment for me. And I realized that, probably the least the food is processed, the better. Um, and I noticed a difference. I felt the change. It was very tangible that when I changed my diet, I felt my energy level go up and increase, and a lot of the childhood illnesses I had completely disappeared. And I know that's probably what you found, and I think it's amazing that we all have very similar paths.
Yes. Yes, because we're told, I think there's just a lot of gaslighting or something, like by the doctors, to say food doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that much. And that's their training. It's unfortunate, but that's just where we're at. So I say there's probably no sense anymore to question how we got here, but know that we're here. And that's the point of the Freedom Kitchen Summit, is to set people free. Don't doubt your intuition. Don't doubt your guidance. Don't let somebody gaslight you and tell you, well, the food doesn't matter that much. And the other thing too, more and more I realize people need to be on different diets. And there's just no one right answer. And I also think we go through phases. I did 2 years raw vegan, but I don't get enough protein. And so I needed to go back to eating more protein. But there's so much shame around food, shame and judgment, that alone is bad for our body. If someone can get back in touch with their intuition and just find what works for them in that moment, because our bodies are evolving and food is changing too. So something that works for us today may not work for us next year, because we don't know what's happening with the soil. We don't know where the food was grown. And generally speaking, you could say, oh, I don't have a problem with tomatoes. But if you get a batch that you don't feel good eating, don't make yourself eat them, because we don't know. There's so many factors, but we've lost touch with our intuition. And I love that part of your story, because it was my intuition too. I kept hearing detox. Well, 20 years ago, there wasn't a lot of talk about detox. I started delving into detoxification. I also started delving into type 2 diabetes because it ran in my family. But here's the irony: I'm adopted. And so, for me to say it runs in the family, I'm not related to the people that raised me, but yet I was getting type 2 diabetes. And I remember hearing Louise Hay. I was just getting into like spiritual practices and spiritual teachers. And Louise Hay said, type 2 diabetes is not genetic, it's learned behavior. It's poor diet and exercise. And I was kind of angry at the moment. Like, when someone tells you it's your fault, it can anger you. And, there's a saying, the truth will, upset you before it sets you free. So I knew that there were other contributing factors. It was an Italian family, and we ate a ton of pasta and bread. And so, carbohydrates were definitely the bane of my existence. But now I aim to teach in a way, it's not blaming. It really is. We don't know what we don't know until we hear it. And some of us will have these intuitive feelings or these intuitive thoughts, but we often get gaslighted. And so I think what I want the listeners to take away from this conversation is, first of all, you do have intuition. Your body knows what's best for you. There's actually a book. Didn't Caroline Sutherland write that book called The Body Knows? The body knows, which was great because you didn't want to become disconnected from your body, and you were afraid medications would do that. Because the body knows, and other people don't know what's best for us. So everyone's going to give you their best guess, or they're going to give you what worked for them. So you're going to get a carnivore saying, carnivore worked for me. I needed to take away all grains. And then you're going to get a vegan, and the vegan's going to say, vegan worked for me. I needed to take away all animal products. And because we're all different. And so what becomes difficult when I talk to people and they say, I don't know what healthy is anymore. I say, it's because you're still looking outside of yourself for the answer.
Mhm. That's right. That's right. I think part of everyone's journey is really to reconnect back with their intuition, and they can be guided by that because it gets overwhelming. I think, people come to me and, their doctor says this, their acupuncturist says this, and then they get overwhelmed. They don't know what to do. And it's like, well, what's going on within you? What do you say?
Yes. Yes. That's why I always do an elimination protocol. And I teach people, I say, you only need to learn how to do it once, and then you can repeat it whenever you need to. But you have to learn how to discern what's going on for you. Journal, know what's going on with you from an emotional state. And then what have you been eating? And so when we start having symptoms, whatever those symptoms are, because weight gain is just one of them, right? But we get brain fog, or we get joint pain, or we feel lethargy. What's going on for you? And don't reach for the next fad diet. Well, okay, I hear, everyone's talking about carnivore, or everyone's talking about vegan, or everyone's talking about, stop looking outside of yourself and tune back in, and then go through an elimination protocol. Eliminate everything and test things and see what your body needs right now. This is how we take our power back. And that's what Freedom Kitchen is about. I just want people to have the tools and the
Mhm.
resources. I want them to know they're supported. If someone is out there and they've been told that they have no hope, they've been denied care, their doctor's telling them there's only one path, I hope that they hear your story. If anyone out here is in hospice already, I hope that they hear your story. Because we want everyone to know that the power is within them and their creator. And we're all here for support. And those of us who've been doing this a long time, we also know that the best thing that we can do is help guide them to find their own answers.
Mhm.
So that's really what my mission is. Now I'm focused a little bit more on kids. That was never intended. It just sort of happened. But kids need to be empowered too. They don't know what's healthy, and they want to eat healthy. They want to make choices. And that's really what my classes aim to do, is just teach them what their options are. There's no right and wrong, good or bad. It's what is better for us, what are some better options, and then teaching them like how to make a cake with coconut flour versus almond flour versus, and so I'm just teaching them skills and options so that they can find what works best for their body. But they are I'm watching them take their power back. Like if we can just simply help people take their power back and get back in touch with their intuition, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Oh, it is. And I think it's powerful that you're helping kids because that's really the future generation. And so, that's going to have far reaching impact, well beyond you and me. And I think that then they can teach their children. And it's almost like I think we've come out of like when you think about the industrial revolution and how the impact canning and processed foods has had, on our health. And now it's like this awakening to see that, hey, there's a better way.
Yes. Yes. And so I'm going to throw a question at you that I know I didn't prepare you for, but with all your years in the military, have you thought about the health of our kids and what that looks like for our future military for our country?
I actually have, because when I was at I went to college at the U.S. Air Force Academy. So I was a cadet for 4 years where I got my bachelor's degree. And, they would prepare all the foods for us, huge kitchen, 4,000 cadets eating lunch, breakfast, dinner, all at the same time. And back then I thought it was healthy. But it was what I learned afterwards is that it was, high carbs, energy food. And when I went back in recent years to my reunion, I noticed that I felt like there was decline in the quality of food. And so I thought about that actually. And I thought, what, how is this going to impact because, that's the one profession where you have to be at the peak of physical fitness to do the job. if you don't, lives could be lost. So I I really kind of, felt sad when I saw the quality of the food and where it was at, just fried foods, things that I didn't think would serve the purpose of what the military is there for. And I know, having gone through some of the, survival training, basic training and all that, you have to get by with, living off the land, but they give you these meals ready to eat. And it was terrible. Even back in the 80s, when I was going through this, it was, like cornflake bar, kind of like the Frosted Flakes, but it was all compressed, and sugar packs, and just you could add hot water if you could boil some water, because you're out in the middle of nowhere. So I think that there's a lot of room to improve as far as what our military is given. I think it would make a huge difference too.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very concerned about the future of our country when we look at 6.1 million kids diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, and over 60% of them are on stimulants. And stimulants set them up for long-term drug addiction because we're really creating dopamine addicted kids. And 1 in 6 right now on the autistic spectrum. And by 2030, that's supposed to be 1 in 2. And 90% of all kids are going to be diabetic, by age 20. I mean, when you're looking at total insulin levels, Dr. Darren Schmidt just shared a study. 90% of all 18-year-olds have insulin levels of a type 2 diabetic. This is not a healthy military. This is, when you're talking type 2 diabetes, autistic, developmental issues, or attention issues, I'm not even sure. And we know that that's just being fueled by the food that they're eating. It really makes me concerned. I just wonder how many people are wondering, like, what will our military look like in 20 years if everyone's on Ritalin or insulin? It's scary to me.
It's a very scary thought. It really is. Even when I was I knew people who were on some of these, drugs, and I could tell, you could just see that it has an impact. It's a huge impact in their ability to function, to think. And I think this is really, it's a national security issue, really.
I agree. And I know we've only talked really about like our personal stories, and we hadn't really talked about that, but I suspected that you would have the same level of concern as me. And what I also suspect is that most people haven't thought that far into the future yet. I think most people are just trying to get by today or this week, and they're not thinking about what does this look like in 10 years or 15 years or 20 years when this generation grows up. So I think that we have an immediate concern with this generation. I think that we have to work really hard to make them healthier than they currently are for our national security, for the future of our country. And then I think we have to do a much better job with soil regeneration so that they have food by the time they're 65. Because right now the estimates are, when I took the bee class, I had heard we were lucky to have 50 years of bees left because the colonies are collapsing. Glyphosate and lawns. Lawns are one of the biggest killers of bees. And then Dr. Zach Bush and all of the research that's being done in soil health, it's no more than 60 years of harvests left. So you look at a kindergartner and you say, well, they're not going to have food when they're 65. By the time they're 65, I mean, that is frightening. And again, I would say most people are more worried about getting through this week and not thinking about their child not having food in 50 to 60 years.
Yeah, that's the tyranny of the moment. I think people are kind of focused on just really surviving day to day, moment by moment. And I think that's the importance of where your summit comes in, because I really think that it will be an eye opener to people. And also it will give them options to consider and hopefully, make a change really at the grassroots level that will affect future generations.
Yeah, and that's what we have to do. We
Mhm.
can't wait for anyone else. It's really like, what can we do? Well, we can plant gardens, we can plant food forests, we can get our kids cooking. Because honestly, when I get the kids in the kitchen, they change. Um, they're interested in growing their own food as soon as they start questioning where their food comes from. That's all we have to do is present that to them, and they grab hold of it. And so I hope that people really get that the gist of this summit is really not only about freedom, but it's about love. It's about, what are we leaving? I thought we were all supposed to leave the world a better place, and I'm in the second half of life, and I, this is what I'm being called to do, because I know I need to leave the world a better place, and the things that I've learned need to be shared so that the next generation can make their own decisions. I hope they make good ones, because I plan to be around for a while. So what I tell my students, I'm like, listen, when I'm like 80 and you guys are running the world, could you make favorable policies for us old people? Because I'll be too old to do anything about it at that point. so, so here's the selfish part, everyone. If you can't do this for the kids, then do this for yourself, because if you're still here when they're the adults, you're going to hope that they're making good decisions.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of the summit and for sharing your story. Everyone will have your links on your cooking page. It's so awesome that you did a cooking segment for the summit. So when the summit goes live next week, every speaker has a speaker bio page with all the social media links and a link to any of your sites so that they can reach out and connect with you. My goal was to make this so accessible that people could reach out to whoever they resonate with, create that support system, hire the coaches that they resonate with, because that's what we're all here for. We're here to support everyone on their journey. And through our stories and through our own experience, we're the best people to provide that support for anyone else wanting to change. You're amazing. Thank you for your years of military as well. Thank you for supporting our country. I'm very, very grateful.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. And thank you too for just, your vision in creating this summit and the impact that you're having.
Thank you. Hopefully there's much more to come. We're going to pull together some master classes and a whole community where we want people to be able to plug into Freedom Kitchen for any of the classes that they want to take. But starting next week, they can definitely see us on the summit starting on March 30th. So thank you again, Deanna. And until next time, let's see, we will stop our Facebook Live here and then we can continue to chat.